Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Keanu. I'm the assistant coordinator of the public access room. I just kind of rushed in because I had trouble logging in. I'm going to wait one more minute and then I'll start the presentation. I just wanted to mention that we are recording this presentation, so it'll be made available for those of you that have been unable to attend or have people that you want to send this recording to. You may do so next week once we get it rendered. I'm in a room where the lights may go off, and in which case they'll disappear. And so if that happens, I got to wave my arms and I'll come back. Um, this will be a general overview of conference, and just know that we're available. Myself, Andy, Lacey, and Alyssa, the public access room staff, will be available during the conference 2 weeks to um, help people if you have questions. And then, if you do have questions about anything I talk about today, feel free to type those questions into the chat. PAR staff is available to help answer those questions, and I will be happy to answer any questions that are unanswered after the PowerPoint presentation is done.
Hey, Keanu.
Yep.
If you can rename yourself in the participant
Oh, I see.
list,
Okay.
it's got my name because I used the account last.
It can be Andy today. Okay, let me do that real quick. Um, Thanks for catching that. Mhm. Okay, all good. All right, everybody, I am going to start my presentation, and we're going to be talking about a time that is kind of exciting for me. This is going to be my 17th conference period, and every year it's a mixed bag, and there's something new to take away. So get to that sharing. All right, so today we're going to talk about what's going to happen the next 2 weeks of the legislative session. It's a period called conference committee. We're talking about what they are, what the conference committees do, how you can find information on how to keep track of everything that's going on, what happens in conference, what happens after conference. Um, so conference is this kind of cloudy, unclear portion of the lawmaking process at the end of session. Um, and it's kind of unclear just because even though people are allowed to watch the discussion um, in the hearing rooms and can watch the Zoom meetings, a lot of what happens between the House and Senate is done outside of the actual conference meeting settings. It's a time when there's lots of activity. There may be multiple they're conferencing on multiple bills, and each bill may have different conferees. So you'll see people walking in and out of the conference room. It's pretty hectic. A lot of things are going on. So if you guys have any questions about things that are unclear, feel free to call us and we'll help make sense of that. It comes at the end of a long session. This year's session actually felt like it went pretty quickly, but the lawmaking process is long for legislators and their staff, for advocates, for everybody that's participating in this process. And so we just got to get through one last hurdle before we get to the end of session, and that's the conference period. So today we're going to be talking about this portion in this infographic after a bill makes it past both the House and Senate. When their drafts are different, they have to reconcile the differences, and they do that in this conference period. So as a reminder, these are all the things that have to happen for a bill to become law in our state. It has to be introduced by a legislator during the first week or two of session. It has to pass through every committee that the House and Senate refer it to. And these are committee hearings are where the public has an opportunity to voice their opinions and concerns on the bill or support. It has to pass at least 3 votes in the House and in the Senate, and these are all the where all the members are voting. The House and Senate have to agree on the exact wording of a bill. And then once it gets out of the legislature, the bill has to either be signed into law by the governor or just not vetoed. If the governor does veto a bill, the legislature has an opportunity to come back in a special session and override that veto. So getting to this portion of where the House and Senate have to agree on that exact wording, if the non-originating chamber or the second chamber made no changes to a bill, this wouldn't be an issue. But as this graph indicates, and this is a graph from 2019, for the bills that have been changed, 95% of the bills were changed by the non-originating chamber in some form, whether the changes were substantive or technical, or they're just defecting a date. Only 5% of the bills are not changed by the non-originating chamber. So almost all the bills are changed once it crosses over. And almost always, those changes are not agreed to by the originating chamber. So for that, this infographic, 98% of the bills that returned in an amended form were disagreed to, and only 2% were agreed to. And the reason for that is most bills have a defective date by this point, and they cannot agree to a bill that will take effect some far off date into the future. So instead, the originating chamber chooses to disagree with the changes made, which means that the bill will go to conference. And we'll talk about conference a little bit more in the upcoming slides. So we just pulled these numbers this morning, our staff did. This is 2025 session numbers. So after second crossover, there are 245 Senate drafts. Only 13 of those were unamended. Senate drafts on House bills. There were 206 House drafts on Senate bills, and only 15 were returned unamended. So another indication that the majority of bills come back in an amended form and they're disagreed to. So conference is necessary because only one version can go up to the governor. The legislature cannot send two competing versions of a bill up to the governor, so they have to reconcile those changes in conference. Unless the originating chamber agrees to the other chamber's versions, and we've seen that in one bill today, the House agreed to a version of the bill that came back to them in a Senate Draft 3 form, and they agreed, and that they'll schedule that bill for final reading next week. So unless the agreement happens, the bills will end up in conference. So we're talking about conference committees. We're talking about groupings of legislators that are appointed by the House and by the Senate, and the appointments are made by leadership. And these members are tasked with coming up with a version of the bill that they can support together. So we're going to use a bill that is actually heading into conference this year. It's SB 3344 SD1 HD2, just so I can show you like how the bill status pages look. So I wanted to remind people, for those of you that don't know, that not every bill will get conference meetings scheduled. Not every bill will have conference schedules. Some bills get all the way to this point where there's disagreement between the House and Senate, and for some reason or another, one chamber or both chambers do not assign conferees. If that happens to your bill, unless they do something extraordinary like bringing the bill to the floor, making the same amendments to it, the bill will die in conference. And if previous conferees were discharged, if previous conferees were discharged, this is not really something for this year, just more as a reminder for next year. For all the bills that are in conference this year that don't make it, the conferees that are appointed this year will probably be discharged next year before next year's conference period. So this is something that usually happens in the back end or the second year of the biennium. Okay, so this is SB 344 HD2 relating to highway safety. It's just a requirement for skateboard users under the age of 18 to wear a helmet. And as you can see by looking at the bill status page, the House made amendments to it and sent it back to the Senate in an HD2 form. And the Senate disagreed with the House with the amendments, well, with the HD2 version that came back. So when we're looking at the two versions of the bill, the Senate bill had what we call a clean date on it, or the date that takes effect, where the bill would take effect upon approval. So that's the SD1 version. That was the version that was sent, that the Senate sent over to the House. In the House, they made changes to it, but they also made changed the effective date of a bill, which was upon approval, to taking effect on July 1st, 2000. And that's the standard House effective date that they put on. And so this bill ended up, having to go through conference. Okay, so when we're talking about the conferees, conferees are appointed by leadership. They're usually the chairs of the committees that the bill went through as part of the process. And the subject matter chairs, or the chairs of the committees that it went through first, are usually what we refer to as the lead chairs. Other conferees or other members of the conference, people call them managers or conferees. Those are other members of the committees that it went through. Okay, so looking at SB 344 HD2 and how to figure out who the chairs, the lead chairs, and will be, is taking a look at the bill status page. So after it passed first reading in the Senate, it got referred to Senate Committee on Transportation and Culture and Arts, and then the Judiciary Committee. So this is a double referral, went through those two committees on the Senate side. After it passed over to the House and went through past first reading, it got referred to the House Committee on Transportation and then the House Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. So those four committees and the chairs of those four committees will be the chairs of this committee. These should be, or their designees, the chairs of these conference committees. But the lead chairs should be the chairs that it went through first. So on the Senate side, that's Senator Lee. He should be the overall lead chair because it's a Senate bill and went through his committee first. And then the secondary chair or co-chair should be Senator Rhodes. And then their House counterpart should be Representative Kila, because he's the lead chair in the House for the House committee that it went through first, the House Subject Matter Committee. And then the secondary chair would be Senate Representative Tarnis. So this is kind of how it works for conference bills. So when we're talking about the conference committee, we're not talking about one big committee. We're actually talking about two committees that are working together to find agreement. So for our demonstration, SB 344, the Senate has their conference committee for SB 344, and the House has their conference committee for SB 344. And they'll be made up of members of the committees that we talked to in the slides that we just went through. And the lead chairs should be Senator Lee and Representative Kila. These conference committees will meet to discuss what they want to see in the final version of the bill. They work together, but votes are taken separately, and each conference committee, so the Senate Conference Committee for this bill and the House Conference Committee for this bill, has to make the same recommendation and vote to pass a conference draft out. And the votes will be taken according to each chamber's quorum requirements. The conference procedures were just posted. I didn't see them posted on the legislature's website yet, but they are posted on the Public Access Room's website. So it's lrb.hawaii.gov/PAR. And then you're going to go to the current legislature tab in the blue banner, and on the left side, under calendars and deadlines, there should be the conference procedures. So these are the rules that the House and Senate agreed upon together and how conference committee is going to work. So just talking about some of the procedures, anytime a conference committee is meeting for the first time, we call that opening conference. They'll give a 24 hours notice, and it'll be up to the lead chair for that chamber. For if it's a Senate bill, it'll be the lead Senate chair. If it's a House bill, it'll be the lead House chair. And those are the people that are responsible for working with their counterparts to pick a meeting date and to open conference. Let me just get back to this part. So after the first meeting, they'll announce the reconvene times if they're not able to come to an agreement, which is probably true for most of the bills initially. They'll announce the reconvene times, and they will file those meeting conference reconvene notices. But sometimes, there may be a delay in them doing that. So hopefully, if you guys are following the conference bills, you may prefer to have somebody in the conference room that can write those times down. Because after that, they just announce them. When conference committees vote on the bill, the votes are taken separately. The House Conference Committee will vote, and the Senate Conference Committee will vote. And again, the rules will specify the quorum needed for convening conference and for their decision making. As mentioned earlier, the originating chamber's subject committee chair usually is the lead chair for that bill, and they're responsible for scheduling the meetings. There should be no new subject matter that should be no new subject matter should be inserted into a conference draft except for the budget bills, the executive, judiciary, and Office of Hawaiian Affairs budgets. And they're not allowed to merge two or more distinct but related measures into one all-encompassing bill. Fiscal bills or any bills that are referred to finance or ways and means, even if there's no appropriation. Fiscal bills must get approval from the money chairs before that conference committee is able to vote that bill out. So that means even if you have a lot of support from, the conference committee, whether or not that bill gets able to be voted on and get out of that conference committee will still depend on whether or not Finance or Ways and Means will release that bill for voting. And that we may not know that until right before the final decking deadline, what we call the cattle call, where all the bills are reconvening just to get Finance or Ways and Means release so they could vote on it. The public is not allowed to testify at the conference meetings. The conference period is just for the conferees to decide bills. The public already had their opportunity to testify on the bills during the hearing process. That said, meetings are open to the public. The public can view the meetings either in person or on the House and Senate YouTube channels. Should you attend conference meetings? That's really up to you. But being present allows you to follow the discussion, to be able to note the reconvene times. Legislators will see that you're there and that you're really invested in the bill. As mentioned earlier, we're heading into conference, so that'll be next week and ending on the final decking deadline, Friday, April 25th, final decking deadline for fiscal bills. So people always ask how they can advocate at this stage, even though there's no opportunity to provide testimony. There's still a lot that advocates can do during this stage. You can contact the conference members, especially the chairs of the conference committee, communicate what you want to see in the bill, what you don't want to see. You know, talk to them, see what, if there could be some compromise. You're able to talk to them in person here at the Capitol. If they have time, meeting them outside a conference room on the rail, sending them an email, calling their office. And so, this is something that is allowed. I know conference members are busy, especially conference chairs, but the public still has an opportunity to communicate their wants and needs and wishes with those conference members. You can also ask your own senator or representative to assist in helping influence the legislation. Their colleagues, they work together. They may be on the conference committee or may have been on the committee that the bill went through. So you can ask them for assistance as well. You can encourage constituents from, if you have friends or family that lives in a key legislators district, you can ask them to contact their legislators about the legislation. Or talk to anyone you've developed a good relationship with at the legislature. Here in Hawaii, especially at the Capitol, um, relationships can go a long way. So it's always good to establish relationships, especially with legislators that would have some type of ownership or control over the types of bills that you are working on, to see if they can help influence the situation. As mentioned earlier, it's kind of difficult sometimes following everything that happens during conference. Conference committees will use comparison sheets or comp sheets, which just list the differences in the language between the latest two drafts. They're not usually made available to the public. The sheets list the pages and lines where there's dissimilar verbiage, and the conferees will refer to these differences during their conference meetings. And this is just kind of used to confine the efforts of the conference committee to point to areas of the bill where, they have differences. And this is a comparison for this is an example of a comp sheet or comparison sheet. And you can see on the left sides the House version and the Senate version, and where they're within the bills, they're different. And so these are provided to the conference chairs and the conference members, so they have an idea of the differences between the bills and what, they need to work on. Okay, so the legislature's website is a good tool to use to stay informed and, track all the things that, are happening during conference. And I know many of you are using the legislature's website already, but the website address is capitol.hawaii.gov. And you're going to click on this laws and research subject heading, and use the drop-down menu and select reports and lists, or go directly to the reports and lists box. And then once you get to the reports and list page, you're going to click on this conference committee tab, which will open the conference page. And then this is a place where you can go to find all the conference meetings for the day, track down legislators based on their conference assignments, get a listing of all the measures that are currently in conference. There's lots and lots of information on this page, and you can view information in different ways. So this is what that page looks like. One page that is kind of handy is the action sheets, and these are pages that the legislature has access to and that they use a lot, where you can see action on Senate drafts with Senate measures with House drafts, or House measures with Senate drafts. It's this middle box right here. You're just going to click on those two links, and it'll list provide a report with the Senate bills that have been disagreed to, as you can see, with House drafts. And when they start assigning conferees, you'll see this information updated. So this is Senate measures with House drafts. And then, oops, this is House measures with Senate drafts. So these are how these pages look like, and they'll populate when there's new action. Another place to go to look is under this conference measures tab. And what triggers the measures and conference link that you see on the bottom is that once one chamber assigned conferees, bills will start to populate in that list. So right now there's only HB 300, which is the budget, and that's because the Senate already assigned conferees. So once conferees are assigned by one committee, I mean one chamber, they'll start to populate. You can also search by subject matter committees. For example, if you wanted to see all the conference bills that went through the House Water and Land Committee, you can just select that committee on the bottom, and it will bring up a listing of all the bills in conference where that particular bill went through the Water and Land Committee. So just different ways of looking at the information on that page. So what are conference meetings like? Things happen very fast, so hopefully everybody's paying attention. Chairs are usually the only ones speaking. Meetings are often grouped together, and they're grouped together by subject matter. So, housing committee will have all of their bills in there. Water and land will have, their bills. And so they're kind of grouped together, even though each bill in the conference has different conferees. A lot of the conferees sit on similar, subject matter bills. They're just not all the same because each bill has their own conferees. Discussion usually is just about whether an agreement has been reached, and we'll show you an example upcoming, or if not, when the conference committee would like to reconvene to continue the discussion. If a bill is sent to conference where the date is clean on it, they could agree. The conference committee that disagreed, or the chamber that disagreed initially, could then agree to the other chamber's version of the bill to recommend that they agree with it and they reconsider the disagreement. But that's only for bills that have a clean date on it. Or they could decide that, they're too far apart and they don't think that they'll be able to come to an agreement. So how you can stay informed about the conference committee actions are on the bill's measure status page. This is where all the information for the bills that you guys are keeping track of is stored. And so this is a bill from last year. It's HB 1577 SD2. And the reason why I brought up an example from last year is because this year we don't have bills that have this much information as they're just starting. And we won't start to see conferees be assigned until next week. So this was last year. And as you can see, after the disagreement, the House appointed their conferees, and then the Senate appointed their conferees about a week later. So it doesn't happen simultaneously. The chambers appoint their conferees independent of each other. And so I just wanted to show you on the right side, once conference committees schedule meetings, you'll be able to see that on the hearing notices. So it says conference, that's a conference hearing, the agenda, and then the YouTube videos where you can watch it. So this is what a conference meeting notice looks like. It has the bill number, and it has all the conferees that have been assigned for the House and Senate. And as you can see, the date of the time is 9:57 a.m. And for conference notices, you'll get a lot of weird times. It's not going to be how regular hearing notices come out where they're 8 o'clock or 8:30 or 9 or 1. You'll get all these random times, and that's just that happens during conference. Okay, so I just wanted to give you an example from that last bill, what conference looks like and why it's important to keep track of what's happening.
Aloha, we are convening the 9:57 a.m. agenda on Thursday, April 25th in conference room 329. For one bill, we have HB 1577, HD1 SD2 related to motor vehicle towing fees. On behalf of the House, it's myself and Rep Nakashima as co-chairs, Reps Kila, Onishi, Matsumoto as managers.
Thank you on behalf of the Senate, myself as chair with co-chair Kyoho Golole and Senator Favela.
And I think similar to our 9:55 agenda, we just need a little bit of time, but I think we generally have an agreement. So we'd circulate a CD1 to members prior to I guess what would be a 5 p.m. conference room 329 reconvene. Does that work for you?
Sounds good.
Okay, let's plan on that. Right on. Thank you. Adjourn.
Okay, as you can see, that's pretty much what conference is. And so we get people calling into the public access room. They stepped out for a little bit and they missed it. So if that happens, you can go back onto the conference video, and you'd have to move the slider to figure out, where the reconvene times are. And then once they do that, they move on to the actual. This is after the fact when they reconvene to vote on it, and this is what the vote looks like.
On behalf of the House, it's myself and Rep Nakashima as co-chairs and Reps Kila, Onishi, Matsumoto as managers.
Thank you. On behalf of the Senate, myself as chair with co-chair Kyoho Kolole and Senator Favela.
And I believe on this measure, we do have an approved or an agreed upon CD1. Okay, and I'll kind of briefly go through that. Okay, what we're going to be doing is making a few small changes. Currently, you can charge $65 for a tow. That'll go up to $75. You can do $75 for towing with a dolly. That'll go up to $85, so $10 increases. And then in addition to that, we're going to insert language that was included in prior drafts, basically that provided that if the tow involves an overturned vehicle, the towing company shall be entitled to an additional charge of no more than $35, which will cap that fee and not allow for a bunch of discretion. And that's pretty much what we got, and it'll be effective July 1st, 2024. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. Rep. Kilo, would you like to take the vote?
Thank you, Chair Todd. All right, adopting the conference draft run with the recommendation as such. Co-Chair Todd.
Aye.
Co-Chair Nakashima.
Aye.
Member Kila voting aye. Representative Onishi. Aye. Representative Matsumoto.
Aye.
Chair, may I take the vote for the Senate?
Please.
Chair Lee.
Aye.
Co-Chair Kyoho Kolole.
Aye.
Senator Favela.
Aye.
The conference draft is adopted.
Great.
Okay, so that's pretty much conference and how it looks like. So we're heading into conference the next 2 weeks. The deadline for conference committees to come up with a conference draft for any bill that it does not have a finance or ways and means referral, they're considered non-fiscal bills. And the deadline for those conference committees to wrap up discussion is April 24th. And usually it's around 6 p.m. For fiscal bills, those are all bills that have a finance or ways and means referral. The deadline for them is Friday, April 25th. And again, it's usually around 6 p.m. where the discussions have to be wrapped up and they have to vote on a conference draft. If they don't, the bills will die in conference committee. And then any conference draft or final form bill must be delivered to the House and Senate Chief's Clerk's office so they can be placed on the calendar for final reading. The deadline, again, is usually 6 p.m. to conclude negotiations. And this is for the decking deadlines. And usually it's around 9 p.m. when conference committee reports need to be available to the chair for their review, the chairs for their review and signature. And then they have to be filed by the conference committees with the chief clerk's office by 11:30. So talking about the fate of bills in conference, the conference committee could come to an agreement on a new version of the bill, a conference draft or CD1. Both the House conferees and Senate conferees must vote to pass the same CD version in order for it to continue to move forward. And then the chairs would sign the committee report with the accompanied new conference draft, being written to the leadership and asking them to recommending that they be placed on the calendar for final reading in each chamber. The originating chambers conferees could just go along with the non-originating chambers version, the current version of the bill, but they could only do that again if the bill has a clean date on it. If it has a defective date on it, they're not going to be able to agree with that. There's no quorum or action required by the non-originating chamber and its conferees. This is just the originating chamber's responsibility. Then a vote is taken on the floor to change their previous decision of disagree to agree, and the bill gets scheduled for a final reading vote. Conferees may fail to come to an agreement prior to the decking deadline. If that happens, the bill will die in conference. And it's the first year of the biennium, so any bill that dies in conference will carry over to next session. There's a possibility that the bill could be moved next session in conference. Again, conferees may be discharged and reappointed. It's almost harder for bills that get kind of stuck in conference the first year. They kind of get lost, but hopefully that's not going to be the case for bills that you guys are following. Final reading must happen before the end of session. That's not over till it's over because bills need to go up to the governor, and the governor has his opportunity to either sign the bill into law or to veto it or to just do nothing with it, in which case it can become law on its effective date. And if the governor vetoes the bill, the legislature can override the governor's veto by coming back and voting to override the vetoes by 2/3 vote in each chamber. There are some helpful conference committee tools just because everything happens really quickly. A lot of offices, when I was in the House, we had, and maybe this was a long time ago, and there may be better ways to do it now, but we had these big wall charts that we keep track of for all of our bills, just so we can note all the reconvene times if legislators wanted to see all the bills that they had, you can see that. So, and this is kind of what it looks like. Just that this is an old one, but you can see how you can just move tabs along, so you can keep track of everything. I also wanted to point out that specific committees will have specific conference room assignments and times when they're able to meet. So this is also available on the Public Access Room website. And should be on the legislature's website as well. So you can tell, based on the bills that you guys are following, where those conference meetings will be held and whether it's going to be in the morning or in the afternoon. Okay, so use the tools that's available to you in following all the action. And of course, one of the tools is the Public Access Room. We can help answer questions that you may have, if it gets kind of into the weeds, and we'd be happy to try to explain what's happening. Call on the relationships that you've developed with your colleagues and your allies. It doesn't just have to be with legislators. It could be with legislative staff or with other advocates or other people that are working on, the bills that you guys are concerned about, and just keeping up the effort. We've got 2 more weeks to go, for all this discussion. And so, just got to get over that hurdle. Okay, so this is our contact information, our phone number, our email address. Feel free to email us if you have questions. Our website has lots of good information on it. We have a YouTube channel, a Facebook page, and Instagram page that's getting more popular. Our staff does a lot of good work with that and sending out a lot of good information. So with that said, I will stop the presentation, and I'm not sure if anybody had
There
questions.
are a few questions, and I got a couple of the questions in chat. There are a few we haven't answered. Kiana, who usually prepares the comp sheets?
So I believe in the Senate Majority Staff Office produces the comp sheets. On the House side, I think the committees are responsible for doing their own comp sheets. They may get help from HMSO. I'm not sure how much help they get, but yeah, I think Senate Majority Staff Office is helping the Senate, and then on the House side, the committees are doing their own comp sheets.
And then anything about the leeway to change content in a bill?
Okay, so I mean, I'm gonna point to the rule. And the rule is in the joint conference procedures, it's 2A. Again, where it says with the exception of the budgetary bills, conference committees shall not amend a measure by inserting any unrelated or new subject matter. And I think that's, I mean, maybe hard to figure out, and it may differ by conference chair and their interpretation of the rules. So I think whatever the conference chairs agree, the House and Senate conference chairs agree to do in amending a bill, and if it gets voted on by the membership, I mean not the membership, by the conference committee members and leadership's okay with it, and it goes to the floor for final reading and it gets voted out, I think that would be okay. But I would defer to the actual conference chairs and the people that are making those amendments. So if you have questions about what's allowed, I would contact the lead chairs for your bills.
Okay, we've got a whole bunch of questions coming in now. If a bill has a bad date, can the originating chamber agree to the non-originating chamber's version and change the date, the bad date?
No, they would have to do that in conference. Yeah, they can't, I mean, I would think that they would have to make amendments in conference to do that.
All right, the next one, how will the the potential announced special session hearings affect the April decision making in conference?
I'm not sure how much, I mean, if it does, it'll mostly be the monetary bills, because I think the concern is, the state not getting as much federal funding as they usually get. So I'm not really sure about like that part, what effect it has, because by this point, they're working on the bills that, were introduced at the beginning of session and made it this far. So, I'm not sure. It may have some effect, but, they're calling a special session, they may be, just punting those, types of appropriations till, to the fall when they have, when they have a better idea of the overall fiscal picture. So yeah, that part I'm not sure. I don't think it has as much of effect as maybe people may think.
And I think typically we see that with special sessions, they'll traditionally describe what the special session is for. So we wouldn't expect them to be able to handle all bills or pick up any bill that comes up unless that's how the special session is described.
Yeah.
So it's usually narrowly focused.
Yeah.
Somebody said back to changing content. Contents in bill drafts are often acceptable, but what about information and public testimony, such as suggested amendments? I think you've kind of spoken to that already.
Yeah, so I mean, because the public access room is not the authority on, what the chambers will allow. And it's really up to, I mean, that's not something that would be new or brought out of left field, because it already discussed. It's on the record. Either the committee members have had access to that testimony. So I would think that it's not new, but again, I'm not the one that is the authority on making that decision on whether or not that's allowed. So, I mean, I would check with the conference committee chairs.
Next question is about how to get hearing notices. Typically, in the past, if you go into your hearing notices on your account, there is an option that you can check to receive conference notices. I think there may have been discussion that they were considering changing it, that if you've signed up for specific committees, and again, that would probably be the lead committee, the first committee that heard it, that they might send it that way. I don't know that they've made a decision yet, but I believe when they were thinking about it, they said they would send out a note, an email to people that were subscribed, I believe, to the conference notice option. But maybe stay tuned for that. I don't think we've heard specific information.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot easier if you're just subscribed by measure, I think.
Yeah, subscribe by measure for sure. How likely is it that a bill dies in conference in year 1, will start again in year 2, or is a new bill usually introduced?
There's usually a new vehicle. For some reason, conference bills that don't make it are kind of stuck in limbo. You know, they're out in outer space and they're forgotten. There's no reason that the legislature can't meet, but usually it's because conference happens at the end of the lawmaking session. And so, you know, when they start next year, they could maybe meet on bills early and conference on them, but they're going to be focusing on next year's bills. And then the priority for conference will be the bills that get to conference next year. So I think that's why it's hard. So, you know, they could introduce a new bill and just run it through the cycle again, and give it a fresh start. And we see that happening a lot.
And then going along with that, and you may have already answered this, do bills that did not pass during the regular session and did not go through conference committee carry over to the next session, or are they dead?
Bills that didn't go through conference
Mhm.
the first year. Yeah,
Yeah.
so those bills are all the bills that don't make it, wherever they are in the process, carry over the first year to the second year. And it's that the second year, if they don't make it that year, then they die because then we start a new legislative, 2-year cycle.
And then a question, will the slides from the presentation be available to share with coworkers? We'll render the recording this afternoon and get it loaded to YouTube. We might not send out the link to the recording till Monday, but we'll send it to everybody that's registered, and then people can also find it on our Public Access Room YouTube channel. And I think one last question, can a provision present in every draft be deleted from the conference draft?
Um, can yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. Like as long as they're not bringing something in, like I said, the benchmark is new material. So if they delete something and replace it with something that wasn't discussed in any part of, any of the other hearings, I would think that based on the rules, that would not be allowed. But I mean, I could see them. I mean, so I don't think that the rules prohibit them from deleting something that was in the draft. So it's always kind of hard to figure out, right? Because they're supposed to be deciding on the last two, well, not supposed to, but I think a lot of the discussion is on the current drafts, right? The last Senate draft and the last House draft. So, for things that were in earlier, um, I would defer that question to the conference committee chairs, but I mean, I think, and again, I'm not the authority on it, that they could, as long as they don't add anything that's, new.
All right, I think that's our last question.
All right, everybody. So just remember that we are here for you guys. Conference is always a mixed bag and things happen very quickly. It's hard to keep track of. Just pay special attention to your bill status pages because anytime there's an update, the information will be updated on the bill status pages. The hard part is at the end of session when they're reconvening within 2 hours or so. A lot of times it's hard for the hearing notices or hearing meeting notices to catch up. And so, you might want to have somebody down at the Capitol or watching the actual videos of the conference meetings. All right, everybody. Well, thank you all. If any of you are around, Art at the Capitol, something that we've been looking forward to, starts at 4 p.m. and goes to 7. It's a fun event. And so come down to the Capitol and celebrate the art and people's art and entertainment with everybody in the building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Couple days away.